Hey gang, so today we are doing some wet blending. I'm going to show you two ways that I do wet blending. Honestly, wet blending is essentially just finding a method that works for you, and you'll be going through a lot of trial and error just to work out what works for you. First up is no added water. I'm just using the paint from the pot. I do this quite often. So I'm just going in with the shadow color. I'm just using a darkish red for this. It doesn't matter what colors I'm using for this. It's not about the colors, it's about the process. And then I'm grabbing this orange and I'm just moving it around to where the overlap is on that red. Trying to get it to mix and blend on the mini. And then just to get that highlight on that edge, I'm just gonna mix in some of the yellow. So the struggles that people generally have with wet blending is the paint drying too fast. This isn't your fault. This isn't the paint's fault. It's the weather. If it is humid, it's gonna dry quickly. If it is the complete opposite of humid, if it's dry, it's gonna dry quickly. You need like a good middle ground. More towards humid is technically better, because there's already moisture in the air, but it's still going to dry it out. So this is what I mean by you need to kind of work out what works for you. Where I am in the world makes it sometimes easier for me to wet blend this way with super thick paint than it is to wet blend with super watered down paint. So I do tend to shuffle between doing those two methods of wet blending, but I did struggle when I was filming this tutorial because I think it was a bit dry, so it was absorbing the moisture out of the paint into the air a lot faster. If you are having trouble, just let it dry and just do it again. When you're wet blending, even though I'm using paint straight out of the pot, it's not super thick layers, so I can potentially do a couple layers of this to like try and build it up to the right gradient that I want without adding too much bulk to the mini. The other type of wet blending that I do is more watered down paint. So on my wet palette, I'm just gonna kind of show you with this little wet bit how the paint reacts to a lot of water and mixing it and showing how those colors interact with each other. And then I just water them down to, I hate using the milk consistency comparison, but I essentially just water it down until I think it's a good consistency. It's such a bad way of saying it, but there's not really like you need this amount of water for this paint, because each paint is thicker or thinner than other paint. So it's not going to be the same with every single paint. In terms of the process with this technique, you essentially just want to slap it on and make these kind of thin puddles of the paint, and they should blend pretty easily with each other, just how they did on that bit of wet paper in the wet palette that I showed before, and they'll just kind of naturally merge together. You might need to like fan it out a bit along some of the edges, like this yellow. Again, with the temperature and humidity and all sorts of things with the weather, it kind of sucks sometimes. You're gonna struggle, and that's just how it is. Paint is relatively difficult. It's not gonna be the same for everyone every single time. The consistency is gonna be different. It's going to react differently with different things. It's not going to act the same way every time. With this style of wet blending, with it super wet like this, if it gets too dry, you don't want to move it around too much. You want to just let it completely dry and then do another really thin layer on top. Otherwise, you'll end up picking up some of the paint with your brush and getting bald patches. You don't want bald patches. They're very annoying to deal with. So yeah, you just keep layering it up until you're kind of happy with how it is. So showing the end result, you can see that it's a little choppy. I did struggle with the humidity a little during this, but it does the job, and if I did keep working at this, I could get it pretty smooth. I do recommend giving it a go on something very flat, like a cape, or even like some paper. just to try out and see how much water you need to add to which paints and stuff like that. But yeah, leave a like, subscribe if this helped, and leave a comment if you want me to cover anything else that I haven't yet, and I'll see you next week.